As we already know, Bootstrap is just HTML, CSS, and some JavaScript. If we want to add any CSS such as margin and padding, we can still select any of our Bootstrap classes or elements, and then add them to our own CSS file, and then change these CSS properties as we've done previously. There is another way which Bootstrap provides us, and this is with some useful utility helpers. If we go over to the Bootstrap documentation, and then in the menu on the left hand side, click on Utilities. Utilities are basically a way for us to quickly add some styles to an element without even having to go to the CSS file. Starting with borders, we can see here we can add borders to an element with some descriptive class names. So we have border, which will apply a border to all four sides. We also have border top, right, bottom, and left too. If we take a look at the menu on the left, we can see these helpers are available for most common CSS properties. In fact, we've already used some of these already in our project. If we click on Flex, we can take a look at the Flexbox section and scroll down. We see some flex values we can add as a class. We've already used Justify Content Between for our form section, but we have access to all of the Flexbox utilities. If we also go down and click on text, just here. Also looking at this text section, we've already used the text center class, which we can see just here. There's also text left, text right, and also some utilities to only apply this on different viewport sizes. Scrolling further down, we have sizing, and we've already used this before inside of our carousel. We've used the W100 class, which we'll have here, and this sets our images to be 100% of the available width. There's also spacing utilities here, and this is what we're going to look at in this video. This is used to add some margin and padding values to our CSS. So if we take a look at how we can use this, we need to construct a class name. We build this up beginning with an M or a P, which stands for margin or padding. Then after this M or P, we then specify which side of the element we want it to apply to. We can add T for top, B for bottom, left, right, and so on. So if we wanted to add some margin to the right, we start with M, R. Then after these letters, we then specify which size we want to add with a number from 0 to 5, or we also have the option of auto. 0 will reset any default margin and padding back to 0. 2 will give us a value of 0.5 rems, and so on. We also have X, which will apply the classes to the left and right, or Y, which is for the top and bottom. So let's go over to our project. And if we shrink the browser down, we're going to start inside of the navigation. So let's drop this down, and we're going to begin getting to work on this form section. First, we're going to add some classes to make this look a little nicer, and then we'll use some of the spacing utilities. So let's open up our text editor, and then get to work in our header section. So if we scroll down to our form inside this header, and in fact, let's remove this carousel from the header and just place this afterwards. So scroll right down to after these controls. Cut this section out. Okay, so then down at the bottom of our header, let's paste this outside. And just make sure this is all okay. Expand the browser. Okay, great. So now we just have our navigation inside the header. So let's get to work with our form section by adding some Bootstrap classes. So just here we can add a form class of form-inline. And then we can add some margin. So we can use my. So this will apply some margin on the y-axis, which is above and below. And then the value of 2. Save that. Reload. And the drop down will now have some margin on the top and bottom of the form. Then we can go ahead and make this look a little nicer with some Bootstrap classes. First of all, the input can have a class of form control. Then we add the type for the input of text, and then a placeholder value of search. Okay, so now the button, we've got the type of submit. Let's just add some classes to this. So the first one can be btn, which we've seen before, then btn outline dash success. Outline will make sure that this color only applies as a border rather than a solid color, and success will give us the green color, which we'll see just here. And these are on their own separate lines because we're on the smaller view here. If we make this a little bit wider, we'll now get these components now in line. So this MY2 which we've added here will apply margin for all screen sizes. We can also set a different margin value for other screen sizes too. For example, if we wanted to reduce this margin on medium-sized devices and above, we could add my-md for medium devices, and then reduce this down to be 1 rather than 2. If we save and then refresh, now when we make the browser the medium-sized devices, this margin is now reduced on the form. Great, so now we have different margin values for above medium-sized devices. This search button is also a little too close to this input. It would look a little nicer with some spacing in between. To fix this, we can add some margin to this input too. So this input just here, let's add a new class of MR, which is margin right. Then small devices and above, let's set this to be 2. Refresh, and there we go. So there's a margin on the right hand side. And this should apply on smaller devices, which is just here and above. Okay, good. If we shrink the browser down to the smaller size, which we've seen before, this button is also tight against the input. Let's add some margin to the button to space this out. So down to the button after btn outline success, we can use my, and then let's set this to be 2. Let's see this in action. Great, so this looks good on the smaller screens. If we stretch this to the larger screens, we could also reset this margin for larger screens, but it does look fine, so I'm going to keep it like this for now. Now on to the free images down at the bottom. We also need to add some spacing to this section. I'm going to add some padding to the inside of this element. So let's go down to the container. So the free images below the carousel. So it's this one here. After container and text center, so let's add some padding on the y-axis, and this can be a value of 5. Reload. Okay, good. So now we've got some padding on the top and bottom to make this container a bit taller, and with some more equal spacing. Finally, to finish off this home page, let's add a footer area. So back over to the HTML, so right down to the bottom, and we'll close this div off. We can add a footer section. So this is going to be a simple footer area. We're going to begin by adding a back to top button. So when the user clicks on it, they'll be taken back to the top of the page. Then afterwards, we'll add a copyright symbol with the name of Gourmet Burgers, with a home and locations link, just to finish things off. So let's begin by adding some classes to this footer area. We can make this a container and BG light to give it the light background color. To space things out, we can add some padding on the y-axis and a value of 4. Open up the P elements, and this is going to be our text of back to top. And in fact, we'll just cut this out and add this in as a link with the A elements and paste this inside. The P tags can have a class, and again, this is a utility class of float right. This will make the text float to the right hand side of the page, and this link can also have a href attribute with a value of a hash. This means when a user clicks on this link, they'll be redirected back to this home page, and then it will start at the very top of the page. So let's take a look at this, refresh, click on back to top, and then the page reloads right at the very top. So there's our back to top link. Then just after this, we can add a new set of p tags. So this is going to contain our text of gourmet burgers with the copyright symbol, and then 2 links, which is going to be for home and locations. So just after this opening p tag, I'm going to add the HTML entity of copyright, which is ampersand, copy, and a semicolon. And then the text of 2018 gourmet burgers. And then I'm going to add a second HTML entity, which is called mid.dot. And this is simply going to be a dot which will separate this text here from the links which we're going to add in next. So next up, we can add 2 links for home and locations, still within this p tag here. So let's add our first link with the text of home. This can have a empty href attribute, as we don't have anything to link to. Just after this link, we can also add this mid.dot once more to separate our 2 links. And then we can add our last link, which is going to be for locations. Again, this can also have the empty href. Give that a save. Over to the browser. Okay, good. So if we zoom in and then scroll down to the very bottom, there's our link, which is back to top, which is floated to the right with this utility here. Then we have our copyright symbol and the text of gourmet burgers, our dots in between to separate our links of home and locations. So this is it now for our project and also our spacing utilities. I hope you can now see how using Bootstrap can really give us a head start when building websites. Of course though, the default styles are not always going to be exactly what we're looking for, and it is encouraged to override them and make customizations to suit your needs. This is it now for our look at Bootstrap, and I'll see you in the next section.